Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Tiffany Mink, Marketing Manager for Interview Valet, and holding true to one of the core elements of Interview Valet's company culture is that work is what you do, not where you go. So if you are typically follow our live presentations, you'll see that I have a new background behind me. I'm in a new location. Um, uh, Interview Valet company culture allows me to be able to still tune in live with you and do these educational trainings and discussions. Even while I'm on the road, I'm doing an extended stay with some family right now. So this will be my new spot for the next couple weeks. And if you have been tuning in this summer, we have had, we've done a little mini topics that are always fun and informational. We talked about kind of start to finish on that introduction to getting started into podcast guesting. We talked about getting, steps to getting on your first podcast interview. We talked about creating a professional one sheet. We have talked about welcome pages and what they are and why you need to be using them in alignment with your podcast interview marketing strategy. And we've also talked about podcast guesting equipment and how to show up sounding like the professional that you are. So really great, fun topics. I will drop a link in just a second where you can go check out all of those different recordings and materials in case you missed them and you want to catch up on those. But then today's topic is a fun one. I think it's very timely and relevant. It has been the buzzword of 2023. And that is the discussion around AI. And as always, with our discussions here, we focus them on how it can apply to podcasting and podcast guesting. So we're going to talk about how experts, forward-thinking podcast guests are leveraging AI to maximize their podcast interview marketing strategy. So with that, I know we have, and one more thing, we do have the chat over there. Please use it. If you have any questions or comments throughout, please put that over there. And we will take some time at the end to get your questions answered and to address any insights or input you might have as well. So please put that over there and we'll be taking care of that. And so with that, I think we're going to go ahead and bring on our presenter today here, our Interview Valet's founder and CEO, Tom Schwab. Hey, Tom.
Hey, Tiffany, greetings from the other side of the lake here.
Yes.
You're right. Work is what you do, not where you go. I'm in Michigan. You're in Wisconsin now. I was going to say, if you're listening to this, drop in the chat there where you're listening in from.
Yes, I am typically in Washington State. So I moved a little bit closer to Tom for my visit here. And yeah, we're joking that I'm right across the pond, a very large pond, but pond still yet. Oh, Lori from San Diego. Hi, Lori. Thanks for joining us. But yeah, I'm really excited about this topic today. I think it's time relevant, like I said, but also kind of fun. It's a new thing. It's evolving by the day, and lots of changes.
Yeah. And I think of, we've always been using new technology, right? I always looked at as, tools don't replace us. They help us do things better. And so I remember back in ChatGPT came out November 30th. And I still remember where I was when I heard about it. It was early December, driving back from Ohio, seeing a client. And I think that the rest of the weekend, I was playing around with it and thought, oh, all the opportunities with this, right? And there'd be times where I'm like, this is scary. And then I'd be like, oh, this is amazing. And it would keep going back and forth with that. But we played around with it really starting in January and really challenged the team. How can we use this technology not to replace us, but to empower us? And early in February, I had done a video of how we were using that, sort of just looking over my shoulder on it. And while that was great, we wanted to do another one sort of mid-year, right? It's been out now over 6 months. And how not just the tactical of how to do it, but even how to think about it. Because the more I've worked with it, this isn't just a better tool. It's a different way to do things. And I think the people, like always, those people that understand the strategy can really leverage that to their benefit. And, you know, I've always said there's a lot of problems in this world, but there's no better time to be alive. And will generative AI destroy us all? I don't know. I can't control that, but I know using it today as a podcast guest can help me be even better.
Exactly. And like you said, this technology, these tools are not meant to replace the human touch, the human behavior that's necessary in business, and especially our discussions focus on businesses who are high touch, high sales services, right? Where you still need that human element. That's why podcast guesting works so well for many people within a business model like that. So an AI is allowing you to free up time that you may be spending on other tasks, that then you can focus more on the human element of your business and with your clients. And so that's kind of what we're wanting to talk about today, of how to really maximize that and use it as an advantage rather than a disadvantage for you.
Definitely.
Okay.
Well, should we jump into it?
Absolutely. Let's dive in.
All right. So the topic of the day: how do you leverage generative AI and ChatGPT to excel as a podcast guest? Like I said, this isn't going to be use this app, use this, use that, because you know what? By the time you see this, right, there's going to be 2 or 3 new ones out there. While I'll mention some of them, I want to talk about the overarching thing of how to think about it, because next week when you see the next new app that is powered by AI, you'll say, oh, I understand how I can use that, right? And like any tool, it can help us or hurt us. I think of a friend of mine, Dan Miller, has got this beautiful tree outside his office. He used to have it before he moved, and it was an artist came with a chainsaw and carved this eagle in it, right? Great artist, great talent, powerful tool. Right now, that same chainsaw, that same year, I just about cut my leg off with. Right, it's not the tool; it's how you use it. So think about that as we go through all of these tools here. And now, the first thing is always, who is this for? Right? I'd say it's also for who is podcast guesting for, who's podcast interview marketing for. We look at this as a relationship sale, right? If you're just trying to do a transaction, if you're just trying to sell a $5 widget, I don't have to know who you are. I don't have to know your point of view on things. I don't have to hear you. It's a transaction. And the problem is that you can be sold out by the person that's more convenient or a penny lower. Really, podcast interview marketing is used for people that are doing relationship sales. And that typically means a bigger lifetime value, right? I hate the term. Okay, you're not supposed to hate. I loathe the term big ticket sales. No, it's people that are talking big ticket sales often are, saying, well, how can we take tactics that work for, $49 products and make those work for, $1,500 products? I'd like to take it from the opposite side. How can you make tactics that work for 6 and 7 figure engagements? How can you scale those down to where you are, right? And that takes a relationship. The other thing with podcast interviews, and I'd really say a lot of national media, is you've got to be able to serve a larger audience, right? If your clients have to drive to you from 5-mile radius of Kalamazoo, you may have a great business. You might be able to host your own podcast just on, Kalamazoo, but it's probably not effective or efficient to use a national platform. The other thing is that podcasts are an awful place to sell, right? They're a great place to get that know, like, and trust. And so you really want to be having something that's interesting, right? That's more thought leadership. Um, our mission is to personally introduce inspiring thought leaders to millions of people they could serve for the benefit of all. And occasionally we get somebody that, has the new reason why you should start a blog, right? That might have been interesting at Y2K. That's not a thought leader topic right now. And if you look at the people that we've worked with over this last 9 years, right, they all hit all of these topics, right? Some of them are top podcasts, some of them are top brands, publicly traded companies, but the large majority of them are thought leaders. Right? They could be thought leaders from universities, from higher education. They could be thought leaders at big brands. They could also be thought leaders that are coaches or consultants. They've got a different point of view. And often that point of view is shared in a nonfiction book, right? So think of yourself and, how could I leverage this? Because anybody that tells you that it's perfect for everyone is either lying to themselves or lying to you, right? One size fits all. We all know that's one size fits none. So this is really where we've seen over the last 9 years that people have gotten results, because the goal is podcast interview marketing. It's results, not just getting another interview. And the AI helps us get those results. Now, another thing you hear me say a lot is that big fish don't swim through funnels and whales don't click, right? That's I try to always give Bill Troy credit for that, right? This is a relationship sale. And Bill's got a great book called Clicksand, How Digital Marketing is Destroying Your Business. And this has been out for about 5 years. I think he was sort of that canary in the coal mine that said, yeah, what's working on a $5 sale does not work on a six-figure engagement. So really think about this. Is this hurting? Is this digital marketing hurting my business or helping my business? And I would say the same thing. AI can hurt your business. And I'll give you some examples of that. It also can help it, right? It's all in how you use it. So let's go back to, I think I skipped a step. Oh, let's go to the whole story behind ChatGPT. Now, generative AI has been going for decades, right? In the 60s, they were talking about it, that it was going to replace people. There was a lot of sci-fi movies around it. It's really the fourth industrial revolution, right? We had computers, but we used computers. And now it's getting to the point where the computers are taking that knowledge and doing more of the thinking for us, right? And so it's the fourth industrial revolution. And while it's been going for decades, it really hit the forefront in the end of November when ChatGPT came out. Now, ChatGPT was a conversational interface that everybody could use. It was free, and it really came out there. And one of the things was that we're limited by the questions we ask, right? I often said at the very beginning, it was like asking the smartest 5-year-old you've ever met a question, right? If you ask a stupid question, they'll give you a stupid answer. And so we started to play it around with it at Interview Valet in December, and then really reported our results in February. And we wanted to update our results here because there's some major changes that we've seen on how you can use it and how you can get better and get better results. One of our core values at Interview Valet is that our only true competitive advantage comes from our ability to quickly adapt and execute. This did not come out of ChatGPT. This actually was said, I think probably 6-7 years ago, right? Early on in the company. And it comes from, the theory of Darwin, right? It's not the fastest that survive. It's not the strongest that survive, but it's those people that can quickly adapt and execute. They not only survive, but they win at that. And that's why we are diving in full force into AI, and we're sharing everything we've learned and also helping that for our clients. So if that's it, if people don't know me here, why should you listen to this guy? Right. I remember it was Admiral James Stockdale. He was vice president candidate for Ross Perot. He started his presidential debate with, "Who am I? Why am I here?" Because that's what people want to know. So why should you value what we're talking about here today? My name's Tom Schwab. I'm the founder of Interview Valet. We've had this company for 9 years. I've been doing podcast interview marketing now for going on 11 years. It amazes me when I hear that. I wrote a book back in 2016 called Podcast Guest Profits. It's highly quoted. For some people have called it the Bible of podcast guesting. I hope they like the original Bible, but it talks about the strategy that we use here. And I'm an engineer by degree. So it's not just, well, we got feelings of this or we think this will work. No, we're very much in process, in learning and continually refining. Over the last 9 years, we've worked with over 1,500 clients, done 75,000 interviews to reach out to over 200 million people. And recently, we just assumed a business from a publicly traded company called Connect, right? And it really is, they saw that their strength was in data and ours was in the podcast guesting and the marketing side of that. So it was the perfect synergy. I've also been called the fairy godmother of podcast guesting. It was Carrie Wilkerson that called me that. If anybody else, if Tiffany called me the fairy godmother, I'd probably be ticked off. But Carrie, such a sweet Southern lady, I'm like, I'll own it. So this is the fairy godmother of podcast guesting view on AI. And really, fundamentally here, there's something that is completely different about this compared to any other tools we've ever used before. Before, it was always the machines empower the humans, right? Instead of me cutting down a tree with my hand, well, I'd use an axe, right? That tool worked really well, right? And then we got chainsaws. Okay, it empowers them. But the problem is now with the fourth industrial revolution, with AI, it's not that the machines are empowering us. The machines are in some ways replacing us, but they'll never replace us, at least not in the near future, because they don't have the human characteristics. They don't have empathy. They don't have stories. They don't have conscience, right? And so if you try to have AI replace you, it's going to look awful, right? You're going to look like a machine. When they're used correctly, you take the AI and the human adds to that and empowers it. And let me give you an example here. Recently, we were hiring and we're looking through all of the resumes that came in and some of the answers to the questions. And somebody had used all of this AI technology, but it was perfect, right? There was no human soul in it. So they would have been much better in order to use that and then add to it. And that's what we're going to talk about with podcast guesting here. And there's 5 areas that I think we can really use AI for podcast guesting. That's researching the shows, right? It's the outreach. It's the preparation, the feedback. And I think feedback is where I have gotten to it mostly, right? That's where I've gotten the most of it. And then repurposing, right? We always tell people, don't do more interviews, do more with your interviews. So let's jump into these. So for the research, what we're using right now is ChatGPT, right? There's a lot of different apps out there that use AI and they're specific to certain things. There's no good one yet for podcasting research. So you go back to the true source, right? And it's ChatGPT. Always use the most current version because that's pulling from the most recent data. And there's some things where people talk about being a chat engineer. I'm not sure if that is the most best term there, but I would just say ask better questions. So some of the prompts that we would use is I am a, and give them a bio of who you are, right? Maybe even start with it. If you're well enough known, you could say, you know, do you know who Tom Schwab from Interview Valet is? Right. And then come back and they give you something. Yes, I know. Okay. Tell me about him. Then you can add to that. Okay. So now knowing who I am, I want to speak with your ideal audience. And could be your ideal buyer persona. Put all the information in there you can. And sometimes this is just a copy of paste from here's our persona, here's who we want to talk to, right? Be very specific. Are they US based? Are they international? What's their demographics, right? Zip code, income, education level, but also what's their psychographics? And then say, give me a list of 50 podcasts you think I'd be a great fit and explain why, right? Because they're going to give you lists of podcasts where you're like, I don't understand it, right? And maybe there's a good fit, maybe there isn't. This is where you have to filter it. And this is a great way to get that initial cut of podcasts. Now, ChatGPT isn't pulling on recent data. So these are going to be older podcasts, right? But that's probably okay because you want a podcast that's more established so that they've got the listeners there. Now, another thing for the research is, what am I going to talk about, right? What are people interested in? And this is a great way to brainstorm, right? To ask them, right? What are 10 topics that I could discuss on this podcast? And why would they be a good fit? Or to come back and say, I want to talk about this area of expertise. And they tend to have a audience like this. What podcast would they be like? So sometimes you're going after the ideal audience. Sometimes you're going after the area of expertise. It's like I said, the data is out there, but it's not pulling a specific list. This is really just going out there. We license about a dozen different databases. We're doing this in our databases, but you can do it in ChatGPT also with the historic data. Now, the next one is outreach, right? And this is one where I would encourage you to use ChatGPT to come up with ideas, but make sure it sounds like you from the beginning going in there. So one of the things that we teach is if you want to be on a podcast, right? Gary Vaynerchuk says, jab, 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 right hook, right? We teach serve, 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 ask, right? So the first serve is leave them a rating and review, right? Well, what do I say? Well, go to ChatGPT. It's easier to edit than it is create, and just say, write a 5-star review for this podcast that I can post on iTunes. Make it sure to tie it to my specific interest and expertise in this area, maybe with the goal of being a podcast host or podcast guest. Now you've got this that you can drop in there, but make sure that it is consistent with your tone, right? If it's got semicolons in it and words that you wouldn't use, it's probably going to look like it was written by a computer, right? So serve, 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 ask. Next one would be write something in response to a post that they had did, a comment, right? Write the social media post to this podcast name with the goal of eventually getting me on as a guest to talk about this specific area. Now, there's even some things, I believe this is powered by Apollo, and Apollo integrates with LinkedIn, and you can actually reply with AI, right? And you can, if somebody emails you, you can hit that button and it'll come up with an email reply. And if you don't like that, you can hit it again. And usually it says from one side to another. So if it's one answer is, yes, I would love to do that, hit again and it's like, no, I wouldn't. And you can start to work your way in there. The other thing is that often it's easy to edit than it is create. So my personal thought is I don't like to pitch, right? And we don't use the word pitch in our organization. I believe you should introduce yourselves to the podcast, but we've tried write an introduction. It doesn't work well off of ChatGPT. They still think of the word pitch, which is more common in PR. So you would write me a compelling personalized email to pitch this podcast with the goal, tell them what they're trying to do, of getting me invited on the show to share my interest and expertise on blank, right? Content is king, but context is God. Also, help them along. Mention the review I left. Mention that we had connected on social media, right? So at least you've got this in there. And one of the things on this, you notice it's still a little bit manual, right? You don't want to just robo pitch, right? Where it's, and I'm sure you could do this with ChatGPT or other things, where put this list of emails in, put the podcasts in, and send out the pitches. It doesn't work, right? I get pitched probably 4 or 5 times a day to be on my podcast. I don't have a podcast, right? But everybody starts it off with, "Dear Tom, we love your podcast and want to be a guest," right? I think I would be a great guest, right? It's just a list, and that will hurt you more than anything, because podcasters talk to podcasters. So we've talked about the research, the outreach. How about the preparation, right? We prepare every one of our clients for everything we've known about the podcast. We tell them, here's the podcast, here's the host, here's the background, here's the things that we have learned, right? You need to do that, not only to listen to the podcast, but there may be things that you don't know. And I've been amazed at how ChatGPT can give you a quick brief of someone, right? And tell them who they're like. Act like a PR agent. And I'm preparing for a podcast interview on this podcast hosted by this person. What should I know about the show and the host to be a great guest? And one of the great follow-up questions is, what else? What else? And they'll just keep giving you information there. And you can come up to speed so much quicker to prepare for the podcast than you could if you were, just listening to an episode or two or going through their LinkedIn profile. The other thing is, before you get on a podcast, you should have some ideas of what stories you're going to tell, what things you're going to think or talk about, right? So I'm not a great copywriter. Sometimes I'm very long. So I'll ask the ChatGPT, act like an expert copywriter. I'm going to be on this podcast. It's hosted by this person. What are 10 great topics that I could talk about that would be engaging to the audience? And they'll bring keywords that are good there, different ideas. What you don't want to do is go on every podcast and talk about the same thing, right? When they start to become, Groundhog's Day, right? It's not interesting to you. It's not interesting for the guest or for the host. And it's really hard to repurpose the content, right? The other one is that I have done this on some podcasts that I'm friends with, and said, tell me about the hosts and of this podcast and help me prepare to meet them and be a guest on the show, right? I'm amazed at what suggestions they gave me. And I'm like, wow, I never connected that. So that's the preparation. This one, if you do nothing else with AI, I would encourage you to do this on your next interview. We were actually looking to play around and see if we could make an app that did this. We're not a software as a service company, so I don't think it's a good fit, but I keep talking to people about it in hopes that someone will do it, right? You should listen to your own interviews, right? And people say, I don't like listening to them. It's uncomfortable, right? But it's like game film, right? You'll learn more on Monday watching the game film than you did on Friday playing the game, or Sunday playing the game, right? So copy these down, right? Take a screenshot and just copy and paste those in there, right? And I've done this with ChatGPT and it has been amazing, right? So take the transcript of your interview, and you can take it and you could load it into YouTube. There's free services out there. We actually use a paid one called Fireflies that transcribes the entire interview. Download it with the timestamps on it, and it'll give the person's name and the timestamp. Then upload that into ChatGPT. Sometimes you have to break it up into 2 sections, just if it's too long. But then ask them, act like an expert speech coach and review my recent media interview. And my name is this, so they know who it is. And then just start asking them questions like, what was my pace compared to the host, right? You always want to talk in a similar pace. And it's amazing. They'll say you did 140 words per minute and the host did, 120. Oh, maybe I should slow it down a little bit. How about the filler words? How many filler words did I use compared to the host, right? Often we'll work this with our team also and just say, it's really easy to point out that, hey, you're using this. Well, I don't think I am. Well, this is what the data says. Another thing is that it's supposed to be a conversation. Ask ChatGPT, how long was my longest monologue? You'll be shocked, right? My longest one, the first time I did this, was 12 minutes. Nobody wants to hear me for 12 minutes. What reading level did I speak at and did the host speak at, right? If you're on an academic podcast, yeah, you should be speaking at, high school level, right? Maybe a college level. But if the host is speaking at a 7th grade level and you're speaking at a 12th grade level, that's a huge disconnect. The name of the program that you can download the transcript. We use something called Fireflies. You can also use YouTube. If you put it on that, it will give you a transcript of it. I'm sure there's all kinds of free ones out there. There's probably new ones since we started to talk here. Other ones. How many times did I interrupt the host? Did I talk over them? That's important. And these are all quantitative things that I don't think about as I'm doing it. But if you ask the questions, you'll get it. What was my tone, right? Was I positive? Was I negative? And here's one. Did I answer the questions? I always think I did, right? But what does an outside observer that's acting as a speech coach for that? And I had mentioned Apollo before. Apollo is one that was giving us the automated responses in LinkedIn and other things just with one click. Now, so that's sort of the quantitative that they're giving on the feedback, right? How fast am I talking? How many filler words did I use? But now let's really dig into it and start asking them questions like, give me specific recommendations, give me detailed examples, and give me detailed ways that I could use this, right? When did I use jargon? I didn't know that I used jargon, but it will say most people don't understand this. Oh, okay. I'll need to change that. And those ChatGPT will say, you used CPM. I think you meant to say cost per thousand. Okay, that's right. It is. When did I fail to answer a question? Could you give me examples of that? Because that way I know next time I'm asked that, I really didn't answer that. Or when could my answers have been more succinct? That's one that I put out there and I'll maybe answer the question in 3 or 4 minutes. And it's interesting to see ChatGPT say, this is what you said. This is how it could be more succinct. It helps you get better with each one. Then the other thing is that, tell me what I did wrong, but tell me what I did right. If I talk for 10 minutes, there's probably 10 good sound bites in there. So just to go in there and say, what are my 10 best sound bites, right? Now you've got those. You could use those as clips, right? If you say, at what point were they in there too? You can cut those out and make clips of them. You can use those as quotes or as images. And then also, what were my 10 worst, right? Let's promote the good ones and learn how to do the bad ones better. This is very powerful. If you have a half hour after a podcast interview, you don't even have to wait for it to come out. Record it on your side, get that transcript, and you can get a wealth of information from this. So we talked about feedback, repurposing. You can get a month's worth of content from every podcast interview. And we've done this. We've tried it. Tiffany every year puts out a guide. It's called the Ultimate Guide to Repurposing Your Podcast Interview. In fact, Tiffany, if you can put that in the chat there, that would be helpful. Now, there's different ways to do it. Next year, I'm sure we're going to have how you can use AI to do it. But this is where the apps have come in that are very, very helpful, right? Repurpose IO, one of my favorite ones that will repurpose a video or an audio. It not only repurposes it, but it sends it up to the different platforms, right? YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, great uh, program there. There's one called Chopcast, right? And I love this. Remember how we talked about find me my 10 best quotes? They'll find you your 10 best quotes in there, and then they'll chop up the video, right? So now you've got videos to use, reels to use, and it's a very, very quick and effective way to do that. One hint that I'll give you that my team gives me is I used to be famous for leaning over toward the microphone, and you'll want to stay in the middle of the screen. And it's like, well, why is that important? Because when these programs chop up your video, if they're going for a reel, they're going to cut off, your left and your right third, right? So if your face is over here, you're going to get cut out. So stay in the middle of the screen. There's one called Pod Pulse. I love this. They find the content, they pull that out, and then you can use it in so many different ways. And then Predis.ai is another one we just started playing around with. Amazing what they can do with that content, right? And once again, they're doing it, but make sure you look at it to make sure that it's human, right? If it's not consistent with your brand, don't put it out there. If the tone isn't right, change it ever so slightly. Like I said, it's like the smartest 5-year-old kid you've ever met out there. You want to check it before you share it with the world. Now, we had a client, Gail Moody Bird, is now the VP of marketing at LinkedIn. She runs LinkedIn Sales Navigator. She previously was with a company and was their CMO, and we worked with them. I loved how she had said something here, that we are getting more efficient at things that are less effective. Think about that. In the time we've been talking here, you could have emailed 1 million people, right? You could have, gone on AI and come up with probably 200 social media posts, right? But just because it's getting more efficient doesn't mean it's more effective. So look at that. Profits come from efficiency and effectiveness. So look at that and say, what I am doing here, is it becoming effective? You can test that, right? If you're posting to Instagram 20 times a day and you're not getting anything from it, doubling down probably won't get you anything more, right? Maybe you look at it and say, maybe my audience isn't here, right? That whole idea of more is not better, better is better. The other one here too is that one of our core values is in this digital age of automation, it's the personal touch that makes the difference. This is especially true with AI generated content, right? If you can add a story in there to the email, if you can add an emoji or even a typo or different type of punctuation, that can show that you're human, right? So don't just let AI replace you. No, you need to support the AI by giving it the empathy, giving it the stories, giving it the heart, giving it the conscience there. And that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about next week. There's a gentleman named Dennis Wu. He's a very big in SEO. And he came out and he said, SEO has changed. Keywords are dead. Long live collaborative content. Let me explain that. There has been so much content out there over the last 6 months, right? That the search engines are sort of forced to say, wow, all of this content, we're going to assume all of it came from ChatGPT, right? And you've got to prove to us that it's real. And until that point, we're going to say you're all liars, cheats, and low quality content, right? So one of the things that Dennis pointed out, and we'll talk about more next week, is the power of collaborative content. So if I'm just writing something, is it me or is it ChatGPT? Now there's checkers on there, but the checkers aren't 100%. We had one client that wrote their own blog, ran it through a checker, and it said it was 80% AI, and it was 100% his. When you have two people doing content, there's a natural give and take to it. It sounds more human. And you think about this, if you're listening to something, right? If they're talking over each other every now and then, if there's a back and forth there, you know that it's more real. And I think you can see even in my experience, when you go to things that are promoted on social media, and you may see this on your feed, if it's got multiple people in it, it gets promoted more because the search engines just aren't looking for keywords anymore. They're doing facial recognition. They know who's in the picture. They're using voice recognition. They know who's talking. They're listening to all the videos. They're watching all the videos. So really this idea of rich, collaborative, human content is such a powerful signal now to SEO. So with that, let's open it up for questions here. Often that the questions that people ask are the ones that other people were thinking of and just hadn't put words to.
Hi, Tom. Uh, that was great. I always enjoy listening to these as well. You know, we work together on putting these topics together, and I still feel like I learn something every time. We had a couple questions come through from Hank. I think those were answered in real time. He asked about the program that can download the transcript of a podcast. I told him we use Firefly's AI. He then asked about Apollo, which I believe you answered to him. Yeah, and that's not a service we currently use, correct?
Apollo is a service that we use on the sales side. It's funny. It's like everything has got like powered by AI now, right?
Mhm.
And so Apollo's one out there. And one of the things I like about that is that it automatically you can add it to your social media, and it will respond, or it will craft messages for you, right? So if you've got a lot of messages that you've got to go through, do you want to personally do all of those, or can you start with a template, or can you start with AI being able to start with the draft and then you change it?
Okay, that makes sense. Lori came in with, can AI help with timing post? I'm going to assume that means social media and different things. To my knowledge, no. Do you know, Tom, differently?
I don't know that I haven't seen anyone that does this. And the other thing that I would be very conscious of is letting AI use big data for that, right? Was worked with a client in the past. It was Dr. John Johnson, and he wrote a book called "The Little Lies in Big Data," right? And so, if you let AI send out your emails or send out your posts at the time they say, that might be good for the global population, but it may not be the best for your audiences. You know, an example of this: what temperature is it outside? Well, I don't know, but I know the average temperature on the face of the earth, I think, is 54 degrees. You're not going to dress for 54-degree weather, even though that's the right answer for the average. So I would look at, I would test it and do different, see what time open rates are. And then other thing is think of your audience, right? Um, if you're going to connect with busy moms, don't do it around the time they're taking kids to school or taking them away from school, right? And if you've got a relationship with somebody, it may be easy on the business side to get to them Sunday night when they're getting ready, as opposed to doing another thing in Monday. So the answer to that is I have never seen any AI telling you when to do it, and I would be scared for just the general.
Right. we like to use AI, like we said, as a tool, right? It's a first draft of something. So you could ask it suggestions maybe, but there's a lot of contingencies on what would be specific and correct for your business and your audience. Um, so Lori came back. Devising the best system for sharing, which site would be the route for the content, then and where to share next and how. And we kind of addressed that. It's really about your audience. This question has come up as I have talked with our clients about their marketing and how to share and repurpose their interviews on social media. And really, it's about who your audience is and when they're online and when they're on that platform. Because the answer for our business model at Interview Valet is going to be different than Lori, than Adrian, than Hank, right? It's about who their target audience is and when they're seeing that media, or when they best would rather receive emails. There are many social media scheduling platforms. There's a lot of free ones out there. Buffer's one we've used. We go through HubSpot. But again, that's something you want to keep a little bit of a personal touch to, right? You don't want to fully automate that system and not be monitoring it, engaging it. And it may change too, I think, time of year, summer, like you referenced busy moms, right? Their summer schedule may look different than their school calendar schedule. So that's something else to consider.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even like we use HubSpot, right? And HubSpot with was it HubChat? It's just amazing what they're doing with AI there. And sometimes they will recommend, the best time in the next 24 hours to send an email, or in the next week to send an email. And while it's interesting, the recommendations they give, sometimes they're totally off. Right. So I can remember one over the 4th of July weekend. They said, oh, the best time to send it is, Tuesday at 10 o'clock. It's like, no, Tuesday is the 4th of July. That will not work in the United States. So I think humans supporting the machines in there.
Right.
Now.
Yeah. I was going to say, do you see Lori's question there?
I did. So, as far as demographics in podcasts, remember ChatGPT is not real time, at least not now. They're going off of older, they've been trained on older data. The demographics in podcasting is still a little bit of a mystery. So from that standpoint, because the market is so fragmented, right? With YouTube, we know 90% of videos are watched on YouTube, right? So they've got all that data. But for podcasts, some people are listening to it on their computer. Some people are on Spotify. Some people are Overcast, iTunes, all the rest of that. So it's fragmented from that standpoint. Now, there's some really good tools out there. I can think of one called SparkToro that goes and says, okay, for all the people that, follow this podcast, what other publications do they follow? Who do they follow? What things do they read? What things do they talk about? And that can give you a way to do it. That is even gotten worse though over the last year, right? I'm all for privacy. And I love that. But when Apple took away the ability to track with the IP addresses, that impacted the data there that you can get.
Right. Absolutely. I'm scanning through more of the comments here. And Lori, I appreciate your questions because too, we're always gauging these topics of what is interesting to people, what people want to learn about more. So maybe if there may be a future topic on kind of social media and scheduling content and all of that, I think that would be another really great relevant discussion. And any more else popped in? Great stuff. And, we kind of talked about how, AI it should not replace the human touch, right? You don't want to fully automate it. We call it a good first draft, right? It's a, even if you have it type up something like you were talking about, creating emails or different things, you don't want to just copy and paste whatever ChatGPT gives you and email it out, mass email it out, right? Because uh, as you talked about, SEO now is just assuming that everything you're saying is AI generated until you can prove otherwise. Um, and I also like the suggestions you pointed out, Tom, about it acting as a speech coach. Acting as finding ways to determine your pace and your filler. Those are all really good things that whether you've gone on one podcast or 100, that we can all kind of it'd be helpful, like you said, reviewing the game footage, right? That I really liked that point there.
Because you're if you ask people for feedback on it, you know, your friends and family, they want you to be happy. They don't want you to be better. Right. And I
Right.
can think of one top podcast host out there that he tells everyone that this is one of my 5 best interviews that I have ever had. And I've had, done over 1,000 interviews on this podcast. And it's funny, anybody that's been on the podcast sort of laughs, and we know, yeah, that's what everybody gets told. Right. So, okay, that's fine. But this is a outside way of just somebody that you can't yell at. They can't hurt your feelings, right? To give it, and it's private too, right? So
Right.
using that with the game film there, you had mentioned how the search engines and stuff are starting to look for more. Is it human or isn't it? I have also noticed that people will ask me, they would on an email or something like that. Oh, I didn't think this was really you. Hmm, right. So they thought it was just, mass emails or, hello first name type thing. And I think some of that comes from they're seeing so much of it that's the filter we put in there. So being able to put something more personal in there, or even, I've done it. I've seen other people do it. This is really me, not a VA or an AI, right? The joke in our team is that if it doesn't have a typo or a misspelling, a typo or a grammatical error, the email didn't come from me, right? Um,
Right.
if it's perfect and it comes from Thomas, that's somebody fishing.
Exactly. We all kind of know when we get an email of from Thomas saying, "I hope this day finds you well." We know that that's a bot and not really Tom emailing or messaging us. And right, it's about, again, and I that's why I feel like it so nicely aligns with really the core and the root of podcast guesting. Right, it's about building relationships and making that a genuine connection with someone, with an audience, with the podcast host, and not being a robot. We've talked about that too, just in typing out your own introduction emails to podcast hosts. Don't be a robot. Don't create this mass produced, I hope this day finds you well email, because people right away, I get so many emails in my inbox, and I just, like you said, you err on the side of it is likely a canned bot email rather than it's a personal message. Um, and so that's where we want to emphasize that AI is a tool to help you, to improve you, to make you more time efficient, to help you review your game footage, but not to replace that genuine connection that you're trying to make and network.
Yeah, even we use a lot of video, right? Because video connects, especially over email. And you can use ChatGPT to say, "Hey, write a video script of me doing this or pitching myself to the podcast, whatever it is," and then just read the script in front of the loom. It will go over a whole lot better than just dropping the words in there.
Yeah, exactly. We use video a lot for that. Again, especially in this digital, everyone's separate. A lot of podcasting is, you're not there in the room with that person. You're not meeting them in person. And so doing something personal like that can help you stand out, especially from the perspective if you're the podcast host who's getting hundreds of pitches in their inbox every day. So with that, I think that's about all we have for today's topic. Do you have any final thoughts there, Tom?
No, it's, that whole thing of there's a lot of problems in this world, but there's no better time to be alive. And these tools that we have, the ability to speak to people, that really, you've got great opportunities. The biggest problem most clients have is obscurity, right? There's a lot of people you could help, a lot of podcasts that want to have you on there, a lot that you could do with that, but it's just obscurity. So, the world needs you not to hear you now more than ever. So if there's anything we can do for you, please let me know. And Tiffany, I'll pass it back over to you and you can tell them about next week.
Perfect. All right. Thank you guys so much. We really enjoyed talking about today's topic. I appreciate everyone who was chiming in over on the chat. As we flowed through this conversation today about AI, I think it really segues us into next week's topic, which is going to talk about how to use podcast guesting as an SEO strategy. As Tom mentioned that, Google is now looking at you, any of your content that you produce, with the side of it was AI generated, kind of you're guilty until proven innocent. So we're going to talk about how to navigate around that and how to prove to Google that you are in fact a real person producing real content, and what Google and all those are looking at in their algorithms to make sure that your content is getting seen and is reaching, the top of the searches within for your audience and for those topics. So we'll be here live again next Wednesday on August 23rd, talking about that. And again, we all really appreciated you joining us today. Those of you that registered, I will be sending over a copy of the recording and any of the resources that we've referenced during today's discussion. If you would like a copy of the recording and are not on our email, please, you can message me here on LinkedIn and I'll get that over to you. And until next time, thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.